What if everything you've been taught about wealth, right down to your last dollar, is missing a rarer, invisible truth? Imagine for a moment that the world's richest treasures don't flow from hard work or luck, but from spiritual laws hidden in plain sight, waiting to be unlocked. Most people walk blindly past these divine patterns, never realizing that the way money moves is not just mathematical, but supernatural, governed by ancient, cosmic principles few ever truly understand. You sense it. Some seem blessed, wealth flowing to them like a living river, while others strive endlessly but stay stuck on dry land. What separates them isn't just strategy, it's a secret alignment with the laws that rule abundance itself. Today, you'll uncover biblical truths about money that will shatter misconceptions and reveal why "give and it will be given to you" is more than a saying. It's a spiritual equation. Are you ready to see beyond the surface, to feel the energy behind every coin? Keep watching to discover the spiritual laws of money and why understanding them could change everything you believe about blessing, lack, and divine provision. Have you ever wondered why, throughout history, some individuals and entire nations seemed enveloped in abundance, while others struggled relentlessly despite similar efforts? What if the answer lies not just in effort or accident, but in a forgotten spiritual blueprint written into the very fabric of existence? Tonight, we begin not with economics, but with echoes of secrets breathed centuries ago, waiting in sacred texts for seekers bold enough to unearth them. Long before stocks, banks, or digital currencies, money carried a deeper, almost mystical meaning. In the ancient Near East, wealth wasn't merely counted in coins. It was seen as a sign of blessing, a reflection of favor, of divine order at play. But here's where many get it wrong. The Bible doesn't begin with abundance. It begins with a garden, with sufficiency, with a creator who gives not just resources, but responsibility. Genesis 2:15 sets the tone. The Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Notice the rhythm: work and keep, stewardship and relationship. Right from the first pages, we find a paradox. God provides everything, yet calls humans to nurture what's given. Imagine the weight of that charge, a garden lush with possibility, but requiring your touch to thrive. What most never see is this: money, like the garden, is not an end, but a trust. Hidden here is the first spiritual law of money, the law of stewardship. Many believe wealth belongs to those who snatch and store, but the deeper truth is, what you have is less an ownership than a responsibility. In 1 Chronicles 29:12, King David declares, "Wealth and honor come from you. You are the ruler of all things." Feel the humility in those words. Even a king, overflowing with gold and silver, claimed it was on loan. You might be asking, isn't this just poetic language? Does it really shape how money moves in the world? The Bible insists it does. Step with me into ancient Israel, tribes in a wasteland, yet their survival hinges not on military might or cunning commerce, but on the law of manna, daily provision. In Exodus 16, each morning came with a mystery. They gathered only enough bread for each day, and when some tried to hoard it, it rotted by. Nightfall. Suspense surges. Why would abundance spoil? The lesson isn't about bread. It's about trust. The spiritual economy rewards those who receive with open hands, not clenched fists. But the tension deepens. Fast forward to Proverbs, where wisdom flows like a river through the mind of Solomon, history's wealthiest sage. Here another law is whispered: honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing. Proverbs 3:9-10. Many glance over this, missing the core. It's not the amount that triggers overflow, but the act of setting apart, the first, not the leftovers. Imagine, centuries ago, families gathering their harvest, feeling proud of fields turned gold. Yet before tasting a bite, they bring their first sheaf to the altar. This isn't just ritual. It's a mystical transaction, an alignment. By releasing the first portion, they declare, "My source isn't my labor, but the giver." Many desire fullness, but ignore the function of trust. The law here is not mathematical, but spiritual, a cycle as enduring as sunrise. This shows us something profound. The earliest biblical economy was driven by cycles of giving and receiving, not grasping and calculating. The tithe, seen in Abraham's life long before law was given, Genesis 14:20, is like a key, unlocking flow when most would build walls. Abraham, freshly victorious, gives a tenth to Melchizedek, priest of God Most High. Note, there is no command, no obligation. This was a spontaneous recognition that increase is sacred, not accidental. You might be wondering, what about times of famine, of struggle? Did these spiritual laws still operate? History explodes with clues. Joseph, favored but betrayed, manages Pharaoh's resources during Egypt's darkest years. His wisdom isn't mere management, it's prophetic stewardship, a vision rooted in recognition that 7 years of plenty are a preparation for scarcity. Here emerges another secret, the law of preparation. True abundance is not luck. It is anticipation, seeing the unseen, trusting what's whispered in the quiet. And yet, another paradox ripples beneath the surface. Jesus, born into poverty, speaks more about money than almost any other rabbi, yet warns, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven." Matthew 6:19-20. The tension tightens. How to pursue abundance without becoming enslaved by it? The answer is hidden in plain sight, a spiritual law that the measure of your release determines the measure of your receipt. Give, and it will be given to you, for with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Luke 6:38. Pause. Imagine feeling the weight and freedom of that truth, the paradox that the more tightly you cling, the emptier your hands become. But when you release with faith, you enter a divine exchange. Let's step outside the written words and dwell for a moment in the everyday world of ancient Palestine. Picture a bustling marketplace, voices bartering, coins clinking, farmers laying grain on wooden scales. But unlike the hard, legalistic measures of Rome or Babylon, Israelite law wove mercy into every transaction. The law of Jubilee, found in Leviticus 25, was a radical interruption. Every 50 years, debts forgiven, land returned, slaves set free. It's almost unimaginable today. Can you feel the shock? A system designed to reset imbalance, to shatter cycles of generational poverty? The point, God's economic vision always carried within it a heartbeat for restoration. Many believe money divides, but the profound truth is, in the biblical story, true wealth heals. This theme echoes into the New Testament, where the early church had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Acts 2:44-45. The pulse of generosity is not just moral, but mystical, a participation in the divine abundance that never runs dry. Standing here, looking back over the landscape of biblical history, we begin to sense a pattern, wealth as a trust, flowing through hands open to give, cycles of release and provision, laws of preparation and restoration. But there's a deeper current rippling beneath these stories, a secret spiritual physics that shapes everything that comes after. But this raises an even deeper question. Beneath all these ancient practices and promises, what is the true spiritual nature and purpose of money itself? What if our answers are not only in history, but woven into the very heart and mind of God? What you're about to discover in the next part will completely change your perspective on what money really is, and why its spiritual laws can unlock a flow that goes far beyond anything you see in your bank account. Are you ready to see with new eyes? The next revelation awaits. Imagine for a moment holding a single coin in your palm. It glints in the light, simple, ordinary, a tool for trade, a token of value, nothing more. Or is it? What if this small object is actually the fragment of a much larger spiritual reality, a thin place where physical and spiritual realms intersect? Most people see money only as a means or a measure, but the truth bursts with far greater mystery. Money is a spiritual instrument, humming with, meaning magnifying whatever passes through it. Why did Jesus, the greatest spiritual teacher the world has ever known, talk about money more than prayer, more than even love? The answer is shocking in its simplicity and depth. Money is never just about things or power. It is about your heart, your trust, your place in the kingdom of God. Every transaction is spiritual. Every expenditure, every act of giving or hoarding becomes a canvas on which invisible laws are written in bold strokes, shaping destinies seen and unseen. You might be wondering, what are these laws? Why do they seem to work above and beneath our conscious actions, like currents beneath the surface of the sea? Let's peel back the first layer, the law of first allegiance. In Matthew 6:24, Jesus delivers a statement that crackles with paradox. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. Notice the drama. Money here is not a neutral tool. It is personified as a rival lord, capable of demanding service, igniting devotion, and provoking anxiety. Imagine feeling your own pulse quicken as you realize your daily choices, even in the mundane, reflect a silent battle for allegiance. Here's what most miss. The spiritual world is less about numbers and more about loyalty. The first great law is this: where your treasure goes, your heart follows. Jesus doesn't say, your heart directs your treasure. He insists, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6:21. It's a reversal, a spiritual mechanism as precise as gravity. If you want to know what you truly serve, follow your money. Its trail will expose the altar of your heart. But this is only the beginning. Dive deeper, and you find the second law, the law of generative multiplication. Many believe that by giving, you lose. But the kingdom operates on a breathtaking paradox. The more you release, the more you participate in the infinite abundance of God. In Luke 6:38, Jesus whispers a formula that echoes through eternity. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Can you sense the physicality of this promise? Picture a basket being filled, not barely, not with reluctance, but pressed, shaken, running over. Giving isn't subtraction. In the spiritual realm, it's multiplication, a law as real and inescapable as the sunrise. Many chase after wealth as if it is finite, a small pie divided by hungry hands. Yet the spiritual law teaches, your supply is directly connected to your willingness to pour out. But what about fear? What about the gnawing sense that there isn't enough, that blessing and lack are mere products of luck or fate? Here we encounter the third law, the law of trustful surrender. Philippians 4:19 proclaims, "And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus." This is not a vague hope, but a radical invitation to let go of scarcity thinking. The deep spiritual insight is this: lack is often an echo of mistrust, a symptom of spiritual misalignment. When you clutch and control, you reinforce separation. When you loosen your grip, something miraculous happens. Provision moves toward you. Imagine the relief, a sudden expansive breath, as you realize that the source is not your salary, not the economy, not the pulse of the stock market, but the inexhaustible riches of God. The Israelites, walking daily for manna, embodied this spirit. They could not store up enough for tomorrow, so they lived in the miracle of daily bread, a living metaphor for trust, dependence, and divine faithfulness. You might sense a protest rising, but what about wisdom? Shouldn't we save, plan, invest? Indeed, yes. Scripture does not preach recklessness. The law of preparation found in Proverbs 21:20 declares, "The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down." The spiritual dimension of money is not laziness or magical thinking, it is active partnership. Working with God, listening for His timing, discerning His nudges. Now step deeper into the chamber of revelation. The Apostle Paul unveils another spiritual law, the law of contented sufficiency. In 1 Timothy 6:6 he writes, "Godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it." Our culture fixates on more, newer, faster, higher, but true wealth begins when your soul is untethered from restless striving. Contentment is a force field, a shield, against the draining power of envy and comparison. Yet the very next verse delivers a jolt. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. 1 Timothy 6:10. Notice the delicate distinction. Money itself is neutral, a servant, but love of money, attachment, obsession, twists its energies into bondage. This is the hidden chain that shackles souls, regardless of balance sheets. In the realm of the spirit, what you possess can possess you, unless you continually surrender it back in trust. Let's unravel another layer, a law most overlooked, the law of reaping and sowing. Galatians 6:7 states, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." This principle pulsates through all spiritual life. Every act of generosity is a seed. Every hoarding decision, too, plants a harvest of lack. The invisible world is not blind to intentions. Imagine sowing kindness, faith, courageous generosity, and then, unseen at first, your future is being watered, nurtured, prepared for a harvest beyond your control. Does this mean that if you give, you will immediately receive tenfold? Is God a vending machine? The answer is subtler but more precious. Sometimes the reward comes in multiplied provision, other times in multiplied peace, relationships, insight, or unexpected rescue when need is greatest. The spiritual laws of money refuse to be predicted or manipulated because their engine is relationship, not transaction. Here's a startling insight. The spiritual world values intent over appearance, process over performance. Recall the widow in Mark 12:41-44, giving 2 copper coins in the temple while the wealthy parade their gifts. Jesus calls his disciples close and unveils a living lesson. This poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. In human eyes, she gave little. In God's eyes, she surrendered all. The real spiritual metric is not magnitude but sacrificial trust. Pause and imagine feeling the trembling vulnerability of giving in poverty. This is the furnace where spiritual laws are forged, where trust becomes substance. Many believe spiritual wealth is about having, but the profound truth is, it is about giving, surrendering and trusting even when logic recoils. This brings us to one of the greatest mysteries, the law of kingdom inversion. Listen to Jesus in Luke 18:22. "Sell all you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven." The logic of the world is accumulation, self-preservation. The logic of the kingdom is self-giving, radical generosity, because in letting go, you're ushered into a dimension where provision becomes inexhaustible, like a well that fills faster the more you draw. More than mere principles, these spiritual laws are invitations, paths that demand response. Imagine money as seed, as mirror, as river, something that flows toward hearts prepared to release, to trust, to align with the rhythm of heaven. This is why Jesus says faithfulness in very little opens doors to true riches. Luke 16:10-11. To treat money as merely material is to miss its role as spiritual training ground, shaping your readiness, building your trust, testing where and in whom your hope is anchored. This shows us something profound about spiritual insight. Money is the most common test the invisible world sets before us, a constant opportunity to move from fear to trust, from control to surrender, from isolation to partnership with God. Yet a question glimmers like a distant lantern. If these laws are so powerful, why do so many who seem spiritual still live in lack? What blocks the flow? Is it possible to unknowingly break these laws? And if so, what consequences does that bring? What you're about to discover in the next part is both practical and astonishing. How the most overlooked spiritual laws of money are being played out, often unconsciously in our modern lives. Prepare to see the world around you with new clarity, and to recognize these ancient laws at work, where you least expect them. The next revelation is closer than you think. Will you dare to look? Now come closer. Let us step out of ancient scrolls and sacred stories and into the pulse and chaos of the present. Hear the digital ping of a banking app. Watch the swirl of advertisements, the endless invitations to chase more, faster, now. It's tempting to think these spiritual laws faded with the dust of old Jerusalem, irrelevant in a world of credit cards and crypto. But what if the laws driving prosperity and lack are more active now than ever? Invisible melodies shaping destinies in our glass and steel age. Close your eyes and picture two homes side by side, a wealthy executive in a gated community and a single mother in a tiny apartment. Both wrestle with bills, both hope for more. But notice, their experience of money is less determined by income than by spiritual alignment. Many believe outward success results purely from effort, networking, or timing, but the deeper, overlooked truth is that the spiritual posture of the heart shapes the flow of provision in mysterious, often counterintuitive ways. Let's witness this through the lens of modern generosity. Imagine a business owner, worn after a long week, choosing to write a check for his church's mission work, even as recession shadows the economy. He gives, not from surplus, but faith. Later, an unexpected contract arrives, one he never planned for. On the surface, just coincidence. But how many times, beneath the headlines and spreadsheets of modern life, have you heard echoes of this principle? Behind the statistics hides the law of generative multiplication. Give, and it will be given to you. Luke 6:38. In boardrooms and breakrooms alike, you will find those who seem to live beneath a waterfall of provision, while others with tightly clenched fists toil without fruit. You might wonder, are such miracles reserved only for a chosen few? Consider the countless stories that slip quietly through the cracks of our noisy world. The grandmother, who, inspired by the ancient promise of Malachi 3, "Bring the whole tithe, and see if I will not throw open the windows of heaven," gives her last dollars with trembling faith. Later, a neighbor covers her groceries, or an anonymous envelope appears. Are these random? Or are they sacred reminders that spiritual law overrides statistics? Here's a dramatic contrast. Many who accumulate vast fortunes by the world's rules often encounter a different poverty: anxiety, relational chaos, loss of meaning. Contrast this with those of humble means who exude joy, generosity, and contentment. The hidden law at play is not possession, but position, the alignment of heart, humility, and trust. As Proverbs 15:16 whispers, better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. Step now into the humming world of non-profits and microloans, where millions are channeled not by tycoons, but by ordinary people giving sacrificially. In Africa, a widowed farmer receives a microloan not from a wealthy government, but from a group of minimum wage workers across the ocean. Miraculously, her harvest multiplies, her village changes. In these modern cycles, the law of reaping and sowing springs alive. A seed, planted with faith, multiplies far beyond its immediate reach, both for giver and receiver. You might be thinking, I've tried generosity, but what about when giving doesn't seem to work, when bills still climb and prayers feel unanswered? Here, modern life unveils yet another layer of spiritual law, the posture of the heart. Jesus marveled at the widow's 2 coins, not because of the sum, but the surrender. In today's world, giving can become a performative act, posted for likes, or an anxious ritual, hoping for quid pro quo. But spiritual law, unlike a vending machine, responds to authentic trust and humility, not manipulation. Many sow but reap little, not due to lack of faith, but because their giving is tangled with fear, pride, or control. Let's dramatize this with a contemporary story. A physician, skeptical of spiritual laws, begins tithing just to prove it wrong. For months, nothing changes. Frustration mounts, until one night she feels a nudge to shift her giving from obligation to joy, from calculation to abandon. Something shifts, not only in her finances but in her spirit. Joy emerges, opportunities surface from unexpected places. The profound truth, the law, was never about an exact percentage, but the quality of the surrender beneath it. Application in the workplace provides another canvas. Picture an employee quietly choosing integrity when tempted by a shady bonus. She refuses the shortcut, trusts in God's provision, and months later, an unplanned promotion arrives. Her story ripples with the law of kingdom inversion. Seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be added to you. Matthew 6:33. In the language of business, these are intangibles. In the economy of God, they are the weightiest currencies. Many modern families live under the shadow of debt, crushed by advertisements promising happiness in the next purchase. The law of contented sufficiency, however, breaks this spell. A young couple, after years of striving for more, senses a call to simplicity. They pause their chase, create space for gratitude, and, amazingly, their anxiety shrinks, their relationships deepen, their needs are miraculously met, even as their income plateaus. Against every financial rulebook, contentment multiplies provision, filling rooms money alone could not furnish. Technology itself now reveals spiritual patterns. Crowdfunding platforms, streaming anonymous compassion from millions, mirror the body of Christ sharing everything in common. Acts 2:44 is reborn, pixel by pixel, in the digital age. People who have never met feel compelled to give for the pure joy, releasing resources into the river of collective abundance. Here, generosity is untheorized, unfenced. It flows. But the most overlooked modern battleground for these ancient laws is within the human mind, scarcity thinking versus expectation. Neuroscience now demonstrates what the Bible always taught. Focus on lack, and you attract more lack. Practice gratitude and anticipation, and you create neural pathways for favor, undeserved opportunities, and blessings. The law of trustful surrender isn't wishful thinking, it's spiritual neurobiology. Consider the words of Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests. Gratitude is the gate that ushers in provision. Anxiety bars its way. Pause. Imagine checking your bank balance and feeling peace, even joy, not fear. Imagine viewing every dollar not as a god or a curse, but as an assignment, a servant, a seed. Modern saints, invisible among us, live this way every day. Bus drivers who buy a meal for a stranger, students who give the last of their scholarship refund to a friend in need, small business owners who put people before profit and find their earnings increasing against all forecasts. This shows us something profound about the present age. Spiritual laws are not ancient relics. They pulse beneath every electronic transfer, every budget spreadsheet, and every act of generosity or greed. They sculpt destinies quietly, with or without our awareness. But what about society at large? Does any of this scale up? Can whole cities, nations, economies be shifted by spiritual law? History whispers that they can. Nations with cultures of generosity often experience surprising waves of prosperity, collaboration, and resilience, while those fixated on consumption or hoarding face inexplicable stagnation and unrest. The biblical jubilee, cancelling debts, radical resets, may seem impractical in an age of global finance. Yet each time communities practice forgiveness, redistribution, or creative generosity, they trigger spiritual ripple effects that change futures in unforeseen ways. And yet, for every promise, a warning glows. The law of first allegiance still operates, pitilessly precise. Where money becomes idle, where greed replaces gratitude, and acquisition eclipses trust, collapse is inevitable. Countless headlines of financial empires crumbling, partners betrayed for profit, and families torn by inheritance feuds all reveal the same broken law Jesus exposed. You cannot serve both God and money. Matthew 6:24. The divorce of trust from provision splits the soul, and ultimately the structures built on such fault lines. But perhaps you sense a question rising, quietly insistent. How do I make these spiritual laws not just stories, but my living reality? How can I align my daily choices, however small, with the river of prosperity God designed? This longing is no accident. It's the Spirit drawing you to practical transformation. What you're about to uncover in the next part is the path from inspiration to application, from knowing the laws to weaving them into every corner of your financial life. Get ready, because the next step is not just theory, it's an invitation. The revelation of how you can unlock and live these ancient secrets right where you are is waiting in the next moment. Will you let it change you? Imagine for a breathless moment, stepping beyond the familiar boundaries of now, past bills, balances, and fleeting economic news, into the strange current of what might be. Let the clangor of daily transactions fade, and open your spirit to a horizon vibrating with the unknown. The laws you've glimpsed so far are not simply ancient echoes or helpful life lessons. They are seeds, and every seed waits for its appointed harvest. The question isn't just how these laws have shaped history, but what is coming. What kingdom fruit will spring forth when the soil of future hearts is ready? It's tempting to see today's financial world as unchangeable, locked by algorithms, governed by unpredictable markets, too vast and complex for spiritual laws to touch. But pause. Beneath every institution, every system, every cryptocurrency surge, pulses an unseen order that bends to heaven's rhythm. The Bible hints that the spiritual laws of money are not only descriptive, but prophetic, unfolding purposes that, if recognized, become the birth canal for new realities. The prophets saw with eyes no spreadsheet could model. Isaiah cries out, Isaiah 61:6, "You will feed on the wealth of nations, and in their riches you will boast." Joel sees a day when the threshing floors will be full of grain, the vats will overflow with new wine and oil. Joel 2:24. These visions weren't for golden ages alone. They are blueprints for moments when God's people align with His economic order, turning lack into overflow, drought into miraculous supply. But here is the dramatic contrast. While the world surges after advancement and innovation, the most significant revolutions will come not from technology, but from spiritual alignment. Jesus pointed forward to astounding future possibilities. Truly, I tell you, anyone who gives up house or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or fields for me and the gospel will fail to receive 100 times as much in this present age, and in the age to come, eternal life. Mark 10:29-30. The prophetic thrust is undeniable. Acts of surrendered generosity create ripple effects across generations and dimensions, compounding in ways that defy linear calculation. Imagine the floodgates opening over a life, a family, a community, unexpected promotions, strategic ideas at the right moment, protection in economic storms, unity where division once rotted hope. This is not fantasy, but future written as promise. Generosity, stewardship, and contentment position us on the launching pad of what the Spirit is about to do. But you may be wondering, how can my simple acts today shape something as vast as tomorrow? Picture the widow of Zarephath, 1 Kings 17, giving Elijah her last meal in famine. That spark of radical faith invoked a prophecy. The jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be empty, until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth. There, in secret obedience, the destiny of a household, and indeed a nation, shifted. This same spiritual law waits for us, not merely to get by, but to participate in divine provision for future seasons. Today's prophets, those who see with spiritual clarity, sense we are teetering on the edge of a generational transfer of wealth and influence. The global shaking of markets, the inversion of old certainties, indict systems built on scarcity and fear. Scripture whispers that in times of shaking, the righteous inherit favor, not by chance, but by alignment with unseen order. The wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. Proverbs 13:22. This is not a formula for greed, but a summons, a call to readiness, character, and radical trust. Now imagine a world where the spiritual law of Jubilee, debts cancelled, wrongs forgiven, land restored, is not a relic, but a prophetic template for economic renewal. Increasingly, innovators and leaders are envisioning debt relief, ethical investments, businesses founded not just to profit but to bless. Each of these movements is, consciously or not, reaching back to biblical blueprints. As these Jubilee moments multiply, the future trembling. Just beyond the visible will begin sliding into view. Economies reoriented toward justice, radical generosity seeding cultural transformation, restoration breaking forth where exploitation once reigned. But there is a tension, a suspense that cannot be escaped. For every opportunity, there stands an equal and opposite danger. As power and money intertwine, there looms the ancient warning. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? Mark 8:36. Future abundance demands stewards, not hoarders. Prophetic potential is always threatened by pride and spiritual forgetfulness. The spiritual economy rewards trust, humility, and generosity, but resists those who manipulate, exploit, or idolize wealth. Many great empires, ancient and modern, have toppled not from lack of ingenuity, but from the rot of spiritual arrogance, severed from the giver. Hear the Spirit's whisper, "See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" Isaiah 43:19. This verse is not just poetic hope, but a present-future invitation. to see God's unrolling economic miracle and to prepare hearts for a fresh outpouring. It will not always look like you expect. Sometimes provision will arrive through unlikely channels, even as old sources dry up. Sometimes doors close so that the greater door, full of supernatural consequence, can be opened wide. Unfolding across the world, a groundswell of believers is being positioned for influence. Entrepreneurs creating companies to bless and employ the marginalized. Churches pooling resources not for comfort, but for city-wide transformation. Young people rising from generational poverty and igniting new cycles of hope through one surrendered act of faith. These are not just inspiring stories, they are prototype glimpses of the kingdom to come. You may feel the stirrings within. Could I be part of such a shift? Is it possible that my simple, sacrificial obedience right now is a keystone in someone else's future blessing? The prophetic answer is clear. Absolutely. The smallest seed, released in faith, becomes a tree under whose branches generations find shade. But prophecy also reveals greater coming storms. The scriptures warn of times when the love of many shall grow cold, Matthew 24:12, when materialism, fear, and injustice threaten to drown the light of generosity. In such times, those faithful to spiritual law will become oases, agents of provision and peace in a parched world. Imagine communities, churches, families so aligned with God's economic order that in crisis they become the Josephs of their era, distributors of hope, wisdom, and divine supply. This is why, unlike any self-help secret or 10-step formula, the spiritual laws of money point to a destiny not anchored just in this life, but in the age to come. Every act of faithful stewardship, every risk of generosity is an investment in a cosmic future. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6:20-21. This calls for vision. It compels us to live with hands open, eyes watchful, hearts ready to release when others withdraw. The more the world says, hold on, the more the Spirit says, pour out. Each step of obedience now is tuning your spirit to the key of coming seasons. This shows us something profound about these days of shaking and promise. Our financial decisions are not just personal, but prophetic. The river of provision you open in your life will overflow into other lives, children, neighbors, whole regions, and its ripples may not be fully seen until eternity's dawn. But here, the wonder deepens. If the laws of heaven can turn deserts into gardens, is it possible they can turn your own spiritual DNA from anxiety, scarcity, striving, into the very channel for generational blessing? What happens when you shift from asking, how much can I get, to how much can I give, and how might God use my trust to write a story greater than I could ever imagine? The next part will reveal the keys to going beyond knowledge and prophecy into spiritual connection so deep it becomes a lifestyle flowing through every choice and every season. Get ready. The coming revelation is more than a principle. It's the pulse of living abundance itself. Will you let it awaken you? Slow your breath, still your soul. Let the faint hum of commerce and care fade into the background. Now in the quiet, imagine what money could become if your heart was deeply, perpetually tethered to heaven's own rhythm. The spiritual laws of money, as we've seen, shape destinies and prophesy futures. But the true miracle is not simply in what flows to you, but in how these laws draw you into extraordinary intimacy with the giver himself. Many spend their entire lives grasping for enough, mistaking numbers on a page for security and possessions for identity. Yet beneath the frenzy, a divine invitation waits. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Isaiah 55:1. This is the haunting paradox. Heaven's finest blessings are not for sale, but for surrender. Let this truth settle on your skin. Money in the spiritual realm is never just about acquisition. It is a living language. Every giving, every receiving, every act of trust, a tender conversation with God. Imagine feeling the pulse of that conversation in all you do. Bills, gifts, budgets, offerings, each one whispering, "Do you trust me? Do you see my hand? Will you align your heart with my heartbeat?" Many believe the spiritual life is detached from the world of finance, but the profound truth is, money is one of heaven's surest bridges to deepening connection with our Creator. Through every season of scarcity and plenty, God calls, again and again, into trust, vulnerability, and partnership. The journey of provision is the journey of relationship. Consider the story of the Israelites in the wilderness, 40 years of manna falling from a realm unseen. Every morning they rose not just to collect food, but to gather grace, to encounter the faithfulness of a God who never skipped a sunrise. Can you imagine living that way, waking up each day with the certain knowledge that what you need will arrive, one day at a time? The very act of reliance became a school of presence. Money wasn't simply sustenance, it was meeting place. Step into the gospel scene. Picture Mary of Bethany shattering her alabaster jar, pouring costly perfume over Jesus' feet, the rich fragrance swirling through the house. Outwardly, it looks foolish, an extravagant waste, yet Jesus receives it not as transaction, but as worship. "She has done a beautiful thing to me," Mark 14:6. Here, giving becomes devotion, and money is transformed into a vessel for love. Imagine entering that kind of intimacy, where every act of generosity pours back into God's heart, filling the air with unseen perfume. You might be wondering, is that really possible for me? Can daily money decisions, so often fraught with stress and calculation, become sacred touchpoints of connection? The answer is a holy yes. Every time you choose trust where anxiety once ruled, every time you respond to the Spirit's nudge to give, especially when it stretches you, you are not just following a principle, you are answering an invitation. This perhaps is the most overlooked spiritual law, the law of relational flow. Blessing is not mechanistic or impersonal, but the overflow of intimacy. In John 15:5, Jesus declares, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit." Financial abundance becomes not a goal, but a byproduct of rootedness, of constant connection to the source. The branch doesn't worry about the flow if it stays attached to the vine. Pause for a moment. Feel the difference between striving and abiding. What freedom erupts when you realize you were never meant to manufacture blessing, only to draw near, to listen, to respond, to stay pliable in God's hands. Imagine checking your accounts, not with fear or pride, but with curiosity. "Lord, show me what you're doing. Teach me to see your fingerprints in this provision, this challenge, this opportunity." Deeper still, the lessons of contentment, gratitude, and open-handedness are all crafted in the secret place of encounter. In Philippians 4:11-13, Paul writes from prison, "I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength." This is not resignation, but liberation. Paul's intimacy with Jesus untethered him from the tyranny of circumstance. Here, spiritual law and relationship swirl together, unlocking transcendent joy, untouchable by luck or loss. Modern life tells you your worth is measured by your net worth, but the Spirit whispers a sweeter song. You are beloved, sought after, provided for, regardless of what the balance says. Money is only ever a mirror for the heart, a channel for surrender. Every act of faithful giving breaks another link in chains of anxiety, opening wider the door to God's presence. As fear falls away, trust grows roots, and the giver draws close. Perhaps you sense the Spirit stirring, pressing you to deeper reliance. Test me in this, God dares in Malachi 3:10, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven. He asks, not for ritual, but for relationship. A courageous willingness to step out, trust, risk, and receive. What's at stake is not just provision, but the widening of your soul to hold more of Him. Now imagine if an entire community, or even a generation, dared to walk in this kind of connection. What if marriages were anchored in shared trust, families in daily gratitude, churches in radical generosity? What if every transaction, large or small, became a quiet prayer? Your kingdom come, your will be done, right here in my wallet, in my home, in my heart. This shows us something profound. Spiritual laws of money are not a checklist, but a call to a living, breathing relationship with God. When you make space for Him in your finances, you invite Him to write new miracles into your story, turning lack to sufficiency, anxiety to worship, striving to fruitfulness, all by the power of proximity. But this intimacy always invites a response. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6:21. What you cling to reveals and shapes the affections of your soul. The deepest delight of the spiritual life is discovering that in the end, God is both giver and gift. Abundance is found not in accumulation, but in attention, seeing Him in every provision, every challenge, every act of sacrificial surrender. Still, one haunting question lingers at the edge of your awareness. How do I move from merely feeling these truths to living them, step by precious step, until my whole life pulses with sacred abundance? What if the secret to transformation is not in trying harder, but in daring to practice those daily, radical choices that invite heaven's economy into your everyday? What you are about to discover in the next part is not just a lesson, but a turning point. The practical steps, habits, and decisions that transform longing into living experience. The blueprint is closer than you think. Will you step into the flow? The journey to abundance as a living reality is about to unfold. Now the air shifts. Revelation moves from distant mountaintops to the ground beneath your feet. The promise of abundance, the allure of intimacy, these are not just visions for the fortunate. They beg to be woven into the very fabric of your daily life. Here and now, let's uncover the secret steps, ancient yet ever new, that turn spiritual law into lived experience. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the whisper, do not merely hear these words, do them, and your life will never be the same. Imagine for a moment waking each morning with fresh expectation. Before you even rise, a prayer ascends. Lord, align my heart with your economy today. Let every decision be a reflection of your wisdom, not my fear. The journey begins not with calculation, but with consecration. This is your first step. Start each day in conscious alignment. The spiritual world responds most powerfully to intention. Money, like any instrument, requires tuning. Your heart is the pegboard, prayer is the hand. Many believe change happens through willpower alone, but the profound truth is, transformation begins with the smallest shift of focus. The second step is to cultivate holy awareness. As you plan, work, spend, or save, invite the Spirit to punctuate every moment with questions. Where is my trust? Is this purchase, this saving, this giving a reflection of my values or of old anxieties? Bring God into the daily mechanics. Budget as an act of worship. Track outflows with the quiet curiosity of a disciple counting loaves and fishes before a miracle. You might be thinking, but what does this look like when the pressure is on? Here's where the third step pulses with power. Practice radical gratitude. In Philippians 4:6, the call is clear. In everything, By prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Thanksgiving is not passive, it's a generative force. Start each day by listing blessings, no matter how small, and naming areas of provision and lack. When you voice gratitude, you uproot the poisonous weeds of complaint and anxiety, making space for supernatural increase. Let's step deeper. The fourth practice is consistent, intentional generosity. The ancient spiritual law is activated by the release, not the accumulation, of wealth. Schedule giving as a non-negotiable, not an afterthought. Perhaps it's a tithe, an offering, a random act of kindness, or a quiet gift to someone in need. What matters most is not the amount, but the spirit. Remember how the widow's mite shook heaven. Set aside a generosity fund, no matter how small, and ask God whom to bless. The joy of secret giving is that its only audience is God himself. You may cringe at the next step, yet it opens immense doors. Live open-handedly, even in lack. This is the fifth step, the daily manna principle. Resist the urge to hoard, to withdraw in fear when finances tighten. Faith grows most in scarcity. Ask, how can I trust and release even when my hands feel empty? As you dare to give during dry times, you tear holes in the net of scarcity, allowing provision to flow unexpectedly. As Proverbs 11:24 says with startling clarity, one gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give, and only suffers want. For many, the word budget feels earthbound, mathematical, even restrictive. But the sixth step is to see stewardship as spiritual art. Track your resources prayerfully, asking, does my spending reflect my calling and my care for others? Stewardship does not mean tight-fisted frugality, but strategic awareness, a willingness to prune waste so fruitfulness can flourish. Embrace accountability. Share your budget with a mature, trusted friend or mentor, not as a sign of weakness, but as an act of humility. Iron sharpens iron. Sometimes the breakthrough you need comes through a question you're too proud to ask yourself. Pause for a mini-conclusion. This shows us something profound. Sacred abundance is found not in striving, but in surrendering your financial story, line by line, to the author who provides both seed and bread. Let's continue. There is more. The seventh step is to listen and respond to the Spirit's nudges. Sometimes heaven's blueprint for your finances comes as a spontaneous prompt, an urge to give, to let go of an old possession, to invest in someone's dream, or to decline an opportunity that glitters but doesn't align. Training your ear for these nudges is like tuning a radio to a hidden frequency. Walk in spiritual sensitivity, and you will find yourself in the flow of divine provision more often than you'd ever expect. Are obstacles inevitable? Yes. The eighth step is to embrace obstacles as invitations. Every season of unexpected expense, job loss, delayed answer, or denied opportunity is a disguised doorway. Instead of panicking, pause and pray. Lord, what are you inviting me into? What new provision, wisdom, or character do you desire to birth through this challenge? Spiritual laws often operate in the soil of adversity. Joseph's journey from pit to palace, for example, began with a setback that was really a setup. Now walk gently into step 9. Protect your heart from the poison of comparison. This is the silent thief of contentment in our generation. Monitor your motives, not by others' abundance or stories, but by your calling. As Paul teaches, each must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. 2 Corinthians 9:7. What unlocks provision for you may look entirely different from your neighbor. The secret is joyfully releasing both success and struggle into God's larger pattern. Finally, step 10. Celebrate testimonies, your own and others. Share stories of supernatural provision, unexpected generosity, sacrificial obedience, and the quiet miracle of daily bread. When you speak of God's faithfulness, you not only honor Him, you fan the flames of faith in yourself and your community. Testimony is the echo that keeps spiritual laws reverberating across seasons and generations. They overcame Him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, Revelation 12:11. Let's anchor these practical steps in the metabolism of daily routine. Each week, set a Sabbath moment to review your finances, speak gratitude, ask for direction, and release anxieties. Invite your children, spouse, or closest friends into this sacred rhythm. Make money meetings less about stress, more about celebration and seeking God's voice. Perhaps you're wrestling with shame or regret about past mistakes, debts, missed opportunities, unwise deals, or seasons of fear. Bring them into the open before the God who redeems all things. Receive His forgiveness, then invite His wisdom to shape your forward path. Allow your journey to become a living story of grace, proof that failures are not fatal, only foundations for new trust. This shows us something profound. Living in the flow of heaven's economy is less about technique and more about transformation. Transformation that comes through small daily choices, surrendered moments, and repeated acts of faith. When you put these steps into practice, you are not simply managing money, you are inviting the supernatural into the everyday. But even as your habits shift and your trust grows, a new dimension calls, one that cannot be walked alone. For the real potential of these spiritual laws is unleashed in the context of shared life, in the rhythms of community, in the tapestry of collective faith. What you're about to encounter in the next part is electric. How spiritual laws, lived in unity, can shape families, churches, and entire communities into wells of provision, generosity, and witness. The secret of multiplication, hidden not in solitary effort but in shared obedience, is about to unfold. Will you be part of it? The next step beckons with promise. Pause for a moment and listen. Can you hear it? Beneath the noise of ambition and the quiet churn of private accounts, there is another pulse, a communal rhythm, ancient as Genesis and fresh as tomorrow's dawn. For the truth is, the spiritual laws of money do not reach their fullness when kept in isolation. They flourish, uncontainable, astonishing when shared, transforming gatherings of ordinary people into communities of supernatural provision and grace. Picture the early church, not as myth but as movement, men, women, children, the wealthy and the poor, gathering in humble homes. Acts 4:32 tells us, all the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. The walls of lack and loneliness crumbled. Divine generosity became tangible, as real as bread broken on the table and hands laid on weary shoulders. Imagine walking into such a fellowship. There is an undercurrent of freedom, joy untethered from personal accumulation. Needs are voiced without shame, abundance is stewarded without pride. Money, once a source of worry or self-protection, is now a living stream, flowing without fear. You see a single mother quietly handed an envelope, a young artist funded for her first canvas, a widow's house repaired by scores of willing hands. Every act, whether public or hidden, is a tapestry stitched by invisible law, God's abundance flowing through willing souls. It's easy to believe real miracles are rare, reserved for Bible times, but the profound truth is, these stories are closer than you think. In war-torn villages, church families pool their last grains of rice, only to find it stretching week after week. In urban food pantries, anonymous donors appear hours before a crisis, hearts prompted by the Spirit before need is even spoken. Still today, countless communities defy headlines of scarcity with, spectacles of unexpected supply. What's their secret? They abide in the law of multiplication, but now on a grander scale. When individuals align with heaven's economy, they become conduits. But when a community aligns, a network of trust radiates outward, compounding impact beyond what any one person could achieve. Jesus himself demonstrated this. 5 loaves and 2 fish, surrendered in faith, feeding thousands through hands working together. What's more powerful? A miracle in one person's life or a city's entire culture being shaped by supernatural generosity. You might be wondering, could something like this really happen here, now, in my church, my neighborhood, my group of friends? History shines with modern examples. Families adopting orphans because their small group rallied with monthly gifts. Struggling businesses rescued not by banks, but by faith communities, investing skills, resources, and prayer. Entire villages rebuilt after disaster, as churches link arms across continents, each giving a little, weaving a safety net large enough for all. But every miracle of shared provision is also fragile, fiercely opposed by pride, secrecy, and comparison. Think of Ananias and Sapphira, a couple who held back part of their gift, keeping up the appearance of unity, but not its truth. Their story in Acts is a haunting counterpoint, a warning that community wealth is not just pooled resources, but shared hearts. The invisible law is this: blessing multiplies where trust and honesty reign. It withers when selfishness or deception takes root. What does this look like in practice? Step into a scene in rural Africa. Farmers harvest as a cooperative, pooling grain to ensure that none go hungry in a drought. In suburban neighborhoods, blessing boxes sit by the sidewalk. Take what you need, leave what you can. No one monitors, yet the boxes never stay empty for long. A retired couple writes anonymous checks to pay off strangers' debts, turning their golden years into seasons of secret. Deliverance. Every story, every act threads back to the same mystic principle: give, and it will be given to you. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Luke 6:38. Pause for a mini conclusion. This shows us something profound. Shared prosperity is not the result of abandoning personal responsibility, but of multiplying individual obedience. When spiritual laws are lived together, their force increases exponentially. Communities that flourish in the spiritual laws of money are shaped by rhythms, groups gathering to pray over financial needs, accountability circles where shame is broken and testimonies are celebrated, small businesses reinvesting first fruits into outreach, not just profits. Some churches establish benevolence funds, trusting the Spirit to guide both giving and distribution. At their best, these funds do more than solve problems. They knit hearts, forging belonging and shared purpose. But sometimes, spiritual breakthrough comes through collective repentance. In times of crisis, whole congregations have dropped to their knees, confessing corporate idolatries, materialism, selfishness, stinginess, then rising to give, serve, and forgive in ways that reset entire spiritual climates. Never underestimate the power of a community that says, enough isolation, let's open our hands, open our books, open our lives to each other and to God. Perhaps you sense a new hunger for such connection. Where can I find this kind of community? How do we build these rivers of generosity together? The answer is both shockingly simple and powerfully costly. Start with one transparent conversation. Share your journey. Listen for hidden needs. Take a risk. Invite a few to pray over finances or dream about new ways to give. Every movement begins with the courage to break silence, to step out of competition and into collaboration. Let the Spirit lead you into awkward generosity, creative partnerships, and radical hospitality. Host stone soup dinners where everyone brings what they have and no one eats alone. Establish a kindness fund in your group, a sacred stash for secret mercy missions. Encourage testimonies regularly. As each story is told, faith grows and the spiritual laws reverberate across your whole circle. Watch as joy multiplies and anxiety dissolves, not through a change in circumstances, but in shared trust. This shows us a final secret. When spiritual laws are unleashed in community, they don't just change material circumstances. They heal hearts, bridge divides, and witness the presence of a kingdom not built on profit and loss, but on love that cannot be measured in digits. But this raises an even deeper question, almost too bold to utter. What if these rivers of collective abundance are meant to flow beyond the community, changing the city, the marketplace, even the world? Are you, perhaps, called not merely to experience this, but to become a carrier, your story, wounds, and obedience shaping futures you may never see? In the next and final chapter, you'll encounter personal stories and reflections that unveil transformation from the inside out. The invitation is now intimately personal. Will you let your life become a living testimony, a beacon to all who need hope that there really is enough? The last, most powerful revelation is just one heartbeat away. Don't turn back now. Have you ever stood at the crossroads of need and hope, holding your breath as if the next unfolding moment might whisper the answer your soul's been craving? Now, in this sacred pause, we come to the canvas where the spiritual laws of money cease to be theory and become living testimony, a mosaic formed from personal reflections and stories ablaze with transformation. It begins not with wealth, but with a question. What if? What if I trusted? What if I released my grip? What if every act, every risk, every confession, every gift was an invitation for God to write his story through my life? Picture Sarah, once riddled with anxiety every time her paycheck arrived. The numbers never seemed enough, and insecurity clouded every decision. Then, one weary night, she read, "Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you." Psalm 55:22. Trembling, she decided to give a little more than felt comfortable, offering it quietly at church. That week, nothing looked different, until her car broke down and a friend, without knowing, volunteered to cover the repair. In that moment, Sarah realized provision is less about predicting outcomes and more about open-handed living. The anxiety that ruled her heart began to unravel, replaced by a growing melody of trust. Or consider Miguel, a successful entrepreneur haunted by the hollowness wealth sometimes brings. Surrounded by achievements, the whisper in the night persisted. Is this all there is? One day, sitting with a mentor, he heard the story of the rich young ruler, and something inside him cracked open. He re-evaluated, choosing to invest not just in profits, but in people. He set aside a portion of his company's income for scholarships. Never publicized, always prayed over. The transformation wasn't only for those who received. Miguel himself felt the peace that surpasses understanding, Philippians 4:7, bloom in his soul. His wealth became a river, not a reservoir. You might be wondering, what about those who have nothing to give? Meet Esther, a refugee who arrived in a new land with only her children and the clothes on their backs. Every meal, every bus fare felt like a miracle snatched from impossibility. One cold morning, she gave away her spare sweater to a neighbor shivering at the bus stop. She didn't know that gesture would catch the attention of a local community worker, who later secured Esther a job. Through each act of quiet faith, she discovered that true wealth resides not in accumulation, but in availability, being present for the assignment of the moment. Pause and feel your own heartbeat. Where do these stories find you? Perhaps you carry regrets, years wasted on fear, trying to control, striving to gather what slipped like sand through your fingers. Or maybe you stand on the edge of a new season, yearning to live with unclenched fists, yet unsure how to release your grip. Let's reflect together. In what ways has money shaped your trust, revealed your values, exposed your wounds? Has it become a mirror, revealing where you place your hope, or a mask, hiding your hurts and insecurities? The spiritual law is timeless. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6:21. To see transformation, you must look honestly at the heart beneath the habit. Consider the testimony of David, a young artist burdened by student debt, and the belief that abundance was always for someone else. In a moment of prayerful surrender, he began setting aside the first dollars of every commission as a thank offering. Even when that felt reckless, his art sales grew gradually, but something greater happened inside. Shame was replaced by dignity, and comparison lost its power. One day, he awoke to find that little by little, his debts had shrunk, miraculously aligned with each stage of his evolving trust. Observe the story of Lisa and Tom, a couple who once hid financial burdens from each other, fearing judgment and disappointment. When they finally spoke the truth aloud, opening their ledgers and their fears before God and each other, they discovered unity deeper than agreement on dollars and cents. Their marriage flourished, becoming a foundation for opening their home to others in need, multiplying hope from honesty. This shows us something profound. Transformation isn't a lightning bolt, it's the accumulation of daily small surrenders stacked upon one another, each yes to God, each act of trust, sowing seeds for future fruit. Real change arrives not when the numbers magically resolve, but when the soul feels safe to let go, to love, to give, to receive. Now slow your gaze and look within. What spiritual law is inviting you forward? Is it stewardship, a call to organize diligently what you have? Is it generosity, a nudge to open your hands wider? Or perhaps contentment, the whisper that enough is not a number, but a name for God's faithfulness? Imagine, if you begin in just one area, giving the first percent, forgiving an old debt, risking a conversation, practicing daily gratitude, you open a door through which God can pour both provision and presence. The dailiness of these small choices summons the supernatural. Your life becomes the living parable someone else desperately needs. And when you falter, and you will, remember this: failure is not a closed door, but a call to deeper grace. Recall the prodigal son. After squandering every coin, it was not wealth restored that healed him, but relationship. Arms open, heart renewed. The truest spiritual lesson is not that you will become flawless, but that you can always come home. Perhaps there's a story rising in you now, a time you gave despite your own lack, a moment when someone's generosity shifted your world, a season when God provided not in the way you wanted, but in the way you needed most. Share it. Testimonies are the currency of spiritual law. They multiply faith, break shame, and mark out the path for others who walk behind. This shows us that the spiritual laws of money are not meant to be distant doctrines, but fiercely personal invitations. They lead you from anxiety to trust, from striving to surrender, and from loneliness to community. One story, one yes, one tiny act of faith at a time. Yet as this journey circles to its close, one final question flames in the heart. If God is this generous, if the laws are this real, how might your life explode with purpose, hope, and provision if you lived as if they were true every single day? What if your next step, your next testimony, your next surrendered moment was more powerful than you could ever imagine? The final revelation is not something you simply witness, but embody. A life awakened, a legacy in motion, a sacred ripple flowing from your heart to the world. Will you let your story be the proof that spiritual abundance is not only possible, but unstoppable? The journey is yours. The next move, wondrous, weighty, and wildly divine, waits in your hands. You have come this far. You have journeyed through ancient histories and modern markets, felt your heart stirred by stories of manna and multiplication, jubilee and generosity. You've glimpsed yourself in the mirror of Scripture, seen how these mysterious spiritual laws of money pulse beneath every transaction, every act of giving, every anxious calculation, and every leap of faith. Now, at the threshold of ending, you stand not at a finish line, but at the wide entrance to a new beginning, a moment of recognition, revelation, and response. Reflect now on all we have gathered, from the garden's first sunrise to the spirit-breathed generosity of the early church, from the unseen substance of trust to the radical possibilities of shared obedience. It all converges on this singular truth. Money is never just money. It is an invitation. How you handle it, speak about it, dream and worry over it is a living prayer, a shaping force, and a divine opportunity. When you draw the thread of every spiritual law together, stewardship, generosity, contentment, trust, multiplication, and shared blessing, you begin to see the tapestry God intends for your life and for the world. Now we can clearly see that money, in all its forms, is not merely a measure of wealth, but a measure of faith, a map to your heart's true residence. Pause, breathe, feel the weight of this moment. All you have learned invites you not simply to know, but to live, to risk stepping out of old patterns into new spiritual territory. Many live enslaved by fear, hoarding never enough, haunted by the myth of self-sufficiency. But you are invited to become a channel of abundance, not just for your needs, but for the flourishing of all those around you. Let the emotional crescendo rise. Imagine the world-changing impact if you began to see your finances not as a fortress to protect, but as a river to release. Every paycheck and payment as a whisper of partnership with God. Every act of generosity an echo of heaven's own reckless love. Consider the legacy your courage could ignite. A family set free from scarcity. A church known for wild provision. Friendships fueled by laughter and trust. Imagine the ripple through generations when children are taught to give before they gather, to trust before they tally. I want you to hear a closing story, a true one. Years ago, a single mother named Clara stood in a food pantry line, cradling 2 children, feeling both invisible and ashamed. One volunteer leaned close, pressed a folded bill into her palm, and simply said, "You are seen." Years later, Clara built her own business, not only breaking her family's poverty, but returning every month to that same pantry, this time to give. The circle was not closed, but opened wider with every blessing passed forward. Transformation did not come with a lottery ticket, but with countless small acts of trust, gratitude, and open-handed living. This is the spiritual law in motion. What is given multiplies, not just in wallets, but in hearts, in courage, in shared hope. Your story might look different, but the principle is the same. When you trust, release, receive, and share, you step into a current that is stronger than any economy, deeper than any fear. Now let's move from inspiration to action. The truths you've received are living seeds, but they require new soil. Transformation begins with the smallest, most courageous steps. Here are 4 invitations, not obligations, for you to consider today. First, commit to start each day, just for 7 days, in prayer and gratitude, consciously surrendering your finances to God and asking for a heart aligned with His kingdom. Second, choose a specific act of generosity. Maybe it's giving a surprise gift, covering someone's bill, tithing, or simply buying a coffee for a stranger. Let your hand open where it once wavered. Third, review your financial habits honestly. Where might fear or pride drive decisions? Invite a trusted friend or mentor to pray with you over your budget and ask God for help to steward resources with wisdom and joy. Fourth, share your testimony. Whether a breakthrough, a daily bread miracle, or an ongoing struggle, offer your honest story as hope for someone else. Comment below, message a friend, or share in your faith community. Your voice is an answer to another's silent prayer. Imagine how your life would change if you took these simple steps. Imagine the joy, the peace, the unexpected provision, the shift from anxiety to anticipation. This is God's moment for you, not a coincidence, but a divine appointment. You are being called into a new season where abundance flows not just to you, but through you, where your life becomes a living invitation for others to witness God's care. And now, extend this journey beyond your own heart. Our world is hungry for evidence that there is more than scarcity, more than striving, more than what can be measured by merit or might. When you share, when you comment, when you offer your story below, you do more than encourage. Your response is a spiritual act, an offering, and a joining of the great movement God is orchestrating in His people. Share your story of God's surprising provision, your battle with financial fear, your own risk of generosity. How has God already started to move, even in small ways? What new truth is rising in your heart as a result of this journey? Your word may light the way for someone else. If this touched you, if you've sensed a burning in your spirit or experienced a breakthrough, consider subscribing or following. There are deeper revelations ahead, stories yet untold, mysteries of God's economy still to be unwrapped. You are invited to be part of a community that lives the laws of abundance together. Let us end together with a declaration, a word that reverberates from prophet to apostle to ordinary lives like yours and mine. A phrase to carry in your spirit long after this video fades. Money is not your master nor your measure. It is the servant of your trust, the evidence of your faith, and the seed of your eternal hope. Sit with that, speak it aloud, let silence and promise linger. Choose today to live as if spiritual abundance is unstoppable, because in Christ it truly is. Let this be your story. Let this be the beginning